Okay, so we're up to the 1921-22 season now, and we have the same four teams. So things don't change. We don't get a new team. Hamilton doesn't get moved yet. The Ottawa Senators led the way in the regular season, 14-8-2. That's right. The NHL realized they couldn't tell what a half was, so they stopped trying to split the season in halves. They basically copied the Pacific Coast Hockey Association that didn't have halves. Toronto finished second, 13-10-1. Montreal third, 12-11-1, and then Hamilton at 7-17. The Hamilton Tigers were not in good shape from the beginning. Of course, I'd covered a couple days ago how the Quebec Bulldogs weren't in good shape when they were moved to Hamilton. They had a horrible season. So 7-17 was actually kind of better than how they'd been. Leading the league in goals that year was Punch Broadbent with 32. Harry Cameron led the league in assists with 17, because we're still not into fully passes the way we see them now, and blue lines and neutral zones. All that stuff is yet to come. The top goalie is again Clint Benedict. I think I need to come up with an award on this channel for top goaltender being Clint Benedict. 14 wins, 2 shutouts, 3.34 goals against average, which again, he topped George Vezina in every category. The NHL had playoffs, so because there's no first half, second half winners, they just have a playoff between the top two teams. The other two don't make the playoffs. Toronto wins game 1, 5-4. Game 2 is a scoreless tie. That's right, tie in the playoffs, which means that the overall score was 5-4 for Toronto between the two games. So it's an aggregate. Pacific Coast Hockey Association and the West Coast Hockey League then had to have a playoffs, because it was decided that the West Coast Hockey League could absolutely challenge for the Stanley Cup. And it was between Vancouver and Regina. And again, it's a 2-game total goals aggregate. Regina wins game 1 in Vancouver 2-1. Vancouver wins game 2 in Regina 4-0. So Vancouver wins by a total score of 5-2. Yeah, 5-2. The Stanley Cup Finals are in Toronto. So it would have been in Vancouver the year before. It's in Toronto this season. And again, the PCHA winner, so close. And considering that the NHL was raiding talent, there were raids on both sides. But at this point, the PCHA is starting to fall behind the NHL financially. The fact that they still make this a fight, it's kind of fun. Vancouver Millionaires win game 1, 4-3. The Toronto St. Patrick's, so this is before they were known as the Maple Leafs. The Toronto St. Patrick's win game 2 in overtime 2-1. Vancouver wins game 3, 3-0. Game 4 is won by Toronto, 6-0. That forces a game 5, which is also won by Toronto 5-1. So every game played in Toronto. Toronto wins the series 3-2. November 1921, the Montreal Canadiens are sold for $11,000 to 3 guys. So think about it. You and 2 pals can be like, hey, $11,000, let's buy the Canadiens. You got her. And that's what happened. They're worth a little bit more than that now, I believe. A little bit more than $11,000. February 11th, 1922, Toronto versus Ottawa. These two teams, a 4-4 tie after 20 minutes. It is the first tie in NHL history. So what happened in this point in time in NHL history, teams played a 20-minute overtime period to decide a winner. There were no overtime lost points. But before people say, oh, are you saying that the NHL should do that now? Absolutely not. This is a 24-game schedule with 4 cities that are right next to each other. We now play an 82-game schedule where teams are nowhere near each other, and the idea of playing a full 20-minute overtime is a little bit much. I could see them expanding overtime a little bit in time, but I don't see them ever going to a full period as they did back then. So that's why you don't have the ties. You have the win-loss record as it is. And under the old system, Ottawa likely would have been an uncontested champion, but with no halves deciding things, they had to go through Toronto. And as what happened when Senators play against teams from Toronto, Toronto won. So Toronto wins the Stanley Cup as the St. Patrick's, a Stanley Cup which is counted for the Maple Leafs because it is the same organization just under a different name. I do like Maple Leafs better. I do think that St. Patrick's works on one day a year. Every other day of the year it just sounds weird. So I'm glad that they changed from green to blue and that they changed to what they have now. But there you go. the 1921-22 season. A season that saw Ottawa still the dominant team in the regular season, but Toronto eke out a Stanley Cup. It didn't really do anything other than delay that dynasty for an extra year, but we'll get into that tomorrow. For now, that's it for this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and I'll talk to you again soon.